The stagecoach rattled to a stop in front of the Yankton trading post, its wheels kicking up a cloud of Dakota dust that hung in the crisp autumn air of 1871. Abigail Bowman clutched her worn carpetbag tightly, her knuckles white with apprehension as she stared out at the rugged frontier town that was meant to be her new beginning. Everything had gone terribly wrong, and now she was alone in a strange place with nowhere to turn. Last stop, Yankton. "Everybody out," the driver called, already busy unloading trunks and parcels. Abigail stepped down from the coach on shaky legs, the journey from Boston having taken its toll. At 22, she had never traveled beyond Massachusetts before agreeing to become a mail-order bride to a man she knew only through letters, Mr. Thomas Fleming. According to their correspondence, he owned a prosperous cattle ranch outside of town. After her parents' deaths from influenza last winter and facing life as a burden to her married older sister, Abigail had answered his advertisement seeking a refined Eastern lady of good moral character to be his wife. But there was no Mr. Fleming waiting for her. "Excuse me," she approached the stagecoach driver. "Is there perhaps another stop in town where passengers are met?" The grizzled man shook his head. "This is it, miss. Main Street, Yankton. If your party ain't here, they ain't coming." "There must be some mistake," Abigail said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Mr. Thomas Fleming was to meet me here. He owns a ranch nearby." The driver's expression shifted. "Fleming? Tom Fleming? Yes, that's right. Miss, I hate to be the one to tell you this, but Tom Fleming was killed 3 weeks ago. Horse threw him during a thunderstorm. They buried him up at Oakwood Cemetery." The blood drained from Abigail's face. She swayed slightly, clutching the post of the stagecoach station to steady herself. "You all right, miss?" the driver asked, genuine concern in his weathered face. I was to marry him," she whispered. The driver removed his hat. "I'm mighty sorry. News travels slow out here. Is there a hotel where I might stay until I can arrange passage back east?" Abigail asked, her mind racing. She quickly calculated her remaining funds, barely enough for a week's lodging, certainly not enough for a return ticket to Boston. "There's the Dakota Inn down the street, but it ain't exactly suitable for a lady alone." He glanced at her sympathetically. "You might try Mrs. Whitmore's boarding house, though I hear she's full up with the railroad surveyors in town." Abigail nodded numbly, picking up her carpetbag. She had one trunk with the rest of her belongings, everything she owned in the world. "I can take your trunk to wherever you're staying," the driver offered. "Thank you, but perhaps hold it until I find accommodation." She couldn't afford to pay him to haul it twice if the boarding house had no room. The sun was beginning to set as Abigail made her way down the dusty main street of Yankton. Dakota Territory was nothing like Boston. The wide dirt roads, the simple wooden buildings, and the raw, unfinished feeling of a town still in the making. Men outnumbered women significantly, and she felt their curious stares as she passed. A saloon door swung open, spilling raucous laughter and piano music into the street. Mrs. Whitmore's boarding house was indeed full. So was the Dakota Inn, which, upon closer inspection, Abigail realized catered more to men seeking female companionship than to travelers needing a respectable room. With growing desperation, she tried the small hotel near the courthouse, only to find their rates far beyond her means. Night was falling fast, and with it, the temperature. October nights in Dakota Territory were cold, and Abigail's coat was woefully inadequate. "You look lost." The deep voice startled her, and she turned to find a tall man watching her with curious eyes. He leaned against the hitching post in front of the general store, his stance casual but alert. His face was partially shadowed by his wide-brimmed hat, but she could see he was younger than she'd first thought, perhaps 30, with features weathered by sun and wind rather than age. "I'm quite all right, thank you," Abigail replied automatically, her Boston manners asserting themselves despite her predicament. The man straightened, stepping into the light from the store window. "No offense, madam, but you don't look all right. You've been walking up and down this street for the past hour looking more worried with each pass." Abigail flushed. Had she been that obvious? "I'm merely considering my options. At night, alone, in a frontier town." He wasn't mocking her, just stating facts in a matter-of-fact tone. "That's not safe." "I haven't many alternatives at present," she admitted stiffly. He studied her more carefully now, taking in her travel-worn but quality dress, her Eastern accent, and the carpetbag clutched in her gloved hand. "You're the woman who came in on today's coach," he stated. "The one asking after Tom Fleming." Abigail swallowed hard. News travels quickly in Yankton, it seems. Small towns run on gossip and coffee. A hint of a smile touched his lips before fading. "I'm sorry about Fleming, he was a good man." "I wouldn't know," Abigail said quietly. "We never met." Understanding dawned in his eyes. "Mail-order bride." She lifted her chin. "Yes, and now I find myself in rather difficult circumstances. No family to wire for help, none who could assist me," she said, thinking of her sister's already crowded home and strained finances. He seemed to come to a decision. "My name's Kade Grayson. I ranch about 5 miles outside of town. Fleming's place adjoined mine to the north." "Abigail Bowman," she replied with a small curtsy, the gesture automatic from years of proper Boston upbringing. "Pleased to make your acquaintance, Mr. Grayson, though I wish the circumstances were different. Most folks just call me Kade." He glanced up at the darkening sky. "Look, Miss Bowman, you need a safe place to stay tonight. I have a proposition for you." Abigail stiffened. She'd heard about the propositions frontier men sometimes made to women alone. "Sir, I assure you not that kind of proposition," he interrupted, a flash of genuine offense crossing his features. "I'm heading back to my ranch tonight. My housekeeper, Mrs. Finch, has a room ready for my sister who's visiting from St. Louis next week. You can stay there tonight, and tomorrow we can figure out your next steps." Abigail hesitated. Going to a stranger's ranch miles from town seemed unwise, yet there was something solid and dependable about Kade Grayson. His clothes were worn but clean, practical attire of a working rancher rather than a dandy or a drifter. His eyes, now that she could see them clearly in the lamplight, were direct and honest. "I couldn't impose," she began. "It's not an imposition. Mrs. Finch would skin me alive if I left a lady stranded in town." He glanced down the street. "Where's your trunk?" "At the stagecoach office. We'll get it on our way out." He whistled softly, and a magnificent chestnut gelding ambled over from where it had been tied. "Can you ride, Miss Bowman?" Abigail eyed the enormous horse with trepidation. "I've ridden in Boston Common on occasion." Something that might have been amusement flickered in his eyes. "Rusty's gentle as they come. I'll take it slow." Against all her better judgment and years of cautious upbringing, Abigail found herself retrieving her trunk and then riding out of Yankton in the gathering darkness, sharing a horse with a man she'd just met. The alternative, spending the night on a bench outside the stagecoach office, seemed far worse. "What brought you to marry Fleming sight unseen?" Kade asked as they rode, his deep voice rumbling against her back where she sat perched in front of him on the saddle. "My parents died last winter," she replied after a moment. "I was teaching at a small girls' school, but the wages weren't sufficient to support myself independently. Mr. Fleming's letters painted a picture of a good life here, difficult perhaps, but honest. He seemed kind." "He was," Kade confirmed. Stubborn as a mule sometimes, but fair. His place has been sitting empty since the accident, his brothers coming from Minnesota in the spring to decide what to do with it. They rode in silence for a while, the rhythmic sound of the horses' hooves and the vast canopy of stars overhead unlike anything Abigail had experienced in crowded Boston. "It's beautiful here," she murmured, almost to herself. "Different from back east, I expect." "Very. Everything seems larger. The sky, the land, the spaces between places. Takes some getting used to," he acknowledged. "Some folks never do. They can't stand the quiet or the isolation." "And you, Mr. Grayson, did you always live in Dakota Territory, Kade?" he corrected again. "No, I came out after the war. Started ranching in '66. The war." The simple statement told her much he'd fought in the terrible conflict that had torn the nation apart and, like many men, had sought a new beginning in the West afterward. They crested a small rise, and suddenly the dark outline of a substantial ranch house came into view. Light glowed from the windows, warm and inviting against the cold night. Several outbuildings clustered nearby, and a large barn stood off to the side. "Welcome to Grayson Ranch," Kade said, a note of quiet pride in his voice. Mrs. Finch proved to be a no-nonsense woman in her 50s, with iron gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She took one look at Abigail's exhausted face and set about preparing hot tea and a late supper while Kade explained the situation. "Of course the poor girl will stay here," Mrs. Finch declared, as if there had never been any question. "Such a terrible thing about Mr. Fleming. Catherine's room is already fresh linens and everything." "Catherine is Mr. Grayson's sister?" Abigail asked, gratefully accepting the cup of tea. "Yes, though heaven knows when she'll actually arrive. That woman changes her plans more often than most people change their stockings," Mrs. Finch said with fond exasperation. After a simple but hearty meal of rabbit stew and fresh bread, Abigail found herself being ushered to a small but comfortable bedroom. The white iron bedstead was covered with a colorful quilt, and curtains framed the window. It was simple compared to her room in Boston, but at that moment it seemed like luxury. "Thank you for your kindness, Mr. Grayson," she said sincerely as he set her trunk down by the wardrobe. "Kade," he corrected for the third time, a hint of resignation in his voice. "And you're welcome, Miss Bowman. Get some rest. Things often look clearer in the morning." Alone in the room, Abigail sat on the edge of the bed, the events of the day catching up to her. She had arrived in Yankton expecting to meet her future husband and begin a new life. Instead, she found herself in a stranger's home, with no prospects and limited funds. As she unpacked her nightgown and toiletries, Abigail tried to formulate a plan. Perhaps there were teaching positions in Yankton, or she could work as a seamstress. Her stitching was very fine. But even as she considered these options, she knew that building a life here without connections or references would be challenging. Returning east seemed equally daunting, with no home to return to and insufficient funds for the journey. Sleep came fitfully, filled with troubling dreams of endless stage-coach journeys to nowhere. Morning brought clarity in the form of sunshine streaming through the window and the smell of coffee and bacon. Abigail dressed quickly in her second-best day dress, arranging her honey-brown hair in a simple but neat style. The mirror reflected a young woman with tired eyes but determined set to her jaw. Mrs. Finch was alone in the kitchen, kneading bread dough with practiced movements. "Good morning, Mrs. Finch," Abigail greeted her. "May I help with anything?" The housekeeper looked up with approval. "Good morning to you, Miss Bowman. There's coffee ready and bacon keeping warm in the oven. Mr. Grayson's been up since before dawn. He and the hands are moving cattle to the south pasture today." Abigail poured herself coffee, trying to think of how to broach the subject of her departure. I should return to town today to seek accommodations and employment. I've imposed on your hospitality long enough. Mrs. Finch snorted. Imposed? Girl, having another woman around this place is a blessing. These men would live like wild animals if I weren't here to civilize them. She slapped the bread dough onto the floured board with emphasis. Besides, Mr. Grayson said you're to stay until you sort out your situation. That's very kind, but he's a good man, Mrs. Finch continued, as if Abigail hadn't spoken. Too good sometimes. Takes in every stray that crosses his path. Got 3 ranch hands that no other outfit would hire, one too old, one too young, and one that came back from the war with a wooden leg. All fine workers now. Abigail sipped her coffee, digesting this information about her host. How long has he had this ranch? Built it from nothing, Mrs. Finch said proudly. Came out here with just his army pay and the horse the government let him keep. Worked for other outfits, saved every penny, then homesteaded this land 5 years ago. Now runs nearly 500 head of cattle. That's impressive, Abigail acknowledged. Hardest working man I know, the housekeeper agreed, slipping the bread into the oven. Now eat your breakfast. Mr. Grayson said he'd be back mid-morning to discuss your situation. True to his word, Kade returned as the mantel clock was striking 10. His face was flushed from exertion and the morning chill, but his eyes were clear and direct as ever when they met Abigail's. Miss Bowman, he greeted her with a tip of his hat. Did you sleep well? Very well, thank you. She smoothed her skirts nervously. Mr. Grayson, Kade, he interrupted, a flash of humor lighting his eyes. Kade, she conceded with a small smile. I appreciate your hospitality, but I must return to town today. I need to seek employment and arrange more permanent lodgings. He hung his hat on a peg by the door and ran a hand through his dark hair, leaving it charmingly disheveled. I've been thinking about your situation. I have a proposition for you. Abigail raised an eyebrow, waiting. Fleming's place is sitting empty until spring. It's a good house, smaller than this one, but solid. He built it 3 years ago with a wife in mind. Kade leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. I'm watching over his stock until his brother comes to settle things. The house is just sitting there. What are you suggesting? Stay there. It's furnished and ready for occupation. You'd have a roof over your head while you decide what to do next. Abigail blinked in surprise. Live alone in an empty house. I couldn't possibly. Not alone, he clarified. Mrs. Finch's niece, Jenny, is looking for a place. She's 16 and wants to earn money before she marries her beau next year. She could stay with you as companion and help. I don't know what to say, Abigail stammered. It's a very generous offer, but I have no claim to Mr. Fleming's property. Consider it temporary caretaking, Kade suggested. The place needs someone living in it to keep it from deteriorating. Empty houses go downhill fast out here. And how would I support myself? I have some savings, but they won't last indefinitely. Kade shifted his weight, seeming almost hesitant for the first time. The Territorial School Board is looking to establish a proper school in the county. Until now, most children have been taught at home or in informal settings. They're seeking a qualified teacher. Hope surged through Abigail. Teaching is my profession. I taught at the Hawthorne School for Girls in Boston for 3 years. I thought that might be the case, he said, satisfaction evident in his voice. The position won't be officially established until spring, but in the meantime, several families have expressed interest in paying for lessons. This seems almost too convenient, Abigail said cautiously. Why would you go to such trouble for a stranger? Kade's expression became more serious. Fleming was my friend. He was excited about your arrival, showed me your letters. He would have wanted someone to help you. He paused. Besides, good teachers are rare out here. It would be a shame to lose one before she even had a chance to see what Dakota has to offer. Abigail considered his proposal carefully. It was unorthodox, certainly, but it offered a solution to her immediate problems. "I would need to see the house first," she said finally, "and meet Jenny." "Of course." Relief crossed Kade's features. "We can ride over there today if you'd like. It's about 3 miles east of here." "Then I should change into something more suitable for riding," Abigail decided, practical considerations overtaking her reservations. "Perhaps Mrs. Finch could arrange for Jenny to meet us there. I'll speak with her." Kade pushed away from the doorframe. Before leaving, he turned back. "Miss Bowman." "Yes. I'm glad you're considering staying. Yankton County could use more people like you." The warmth in his voice stayed with Abigail as she changed into her sturdiest skirt and boots. An hour later, they were approaching a modest but well-built cabin nestled against a small copse of trees. A stream ran nearby, and the setting was picturesque despite the autumn barrenness. Unlike Kade's larger ranch with its multiple outbuildings, this was a simpler homestead, a main house, a small barn, and a chicken coop. Fleming built with an eye toward expansion, Kade explained as they dismounted. Planned to add on as his family grew. The thought sent an unexpected pang through Abigail. This house had been built with her in mind, or at least with the idea of a wife and future children. Now its builder was gone before she'd even had a chance to meet him. The interior of the house was simple but thoughtfully constructed. The main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a stone fireplace dominating one wall. A bedroom opened off to one side, and a smaller room clearly intended as a nursery or child's room adjoined it. The furniture was sturdy frontier craftsmanship, built for practicality rather than elegance. "It's lovely," Abigail said softly, running her hand along the smooth plank table. "He must have been very skilled." "He hired a carpenter from Yankton for the cabinetry, but did much of the work himself," Kade confirmed, watching her reaction carefully. "The roof doesn't leak and the chimney draws well. It's snug in winter." Abigail moved to the window, taking in the view of rolling prairie grassland stretching toward distant hills. "It's so different from Boston," she mused. "There we were surrounded by buildings and people. Here it's just space. Too much space." Kade asked, a note of genuine curiosity in his voice. She considered the question honestly. "I don't know yet. It's overwhelming but also freeing somehow." A wagon approaching interrupted their conversation. Mrs. Finch was driving with a young girl beside her. Jenny proved to be a friendly, talkative teenager with bright eyes and a quick smile. She took to Abigail immediately, chattering about the area and the families whose children might become pupils. "Most of the ranching families have at least 2 or 3 children," Jenny explained as they toured the property. "And there are several homesteaders with young ones too. They're scattered across the county, but folks are used to traveling for necessities." "How many students might there be?" Abigail asked. 15 or 20, I'd reckon," Mrs. Finch answered. "Ages 5 to 16 or so. Some of the older boys only come during the winter months when ranch work is slower." "A varied group," Abigail noted, already thinking of how to organize lessons for different age levels. "I'm accustomed to teaching girls between 10 and 16, but I've worked with younger children as well." "You'll do fine," Mrs. Finch said confidently. "These children are eager to learn. Most of their parents can read and write, but not much beyond that." By the time they returned to the main room, Abigail had made her decision. "I would like to accept your offer, Mr. Grayson Kade," she corrected herself. "Jenny and I will stay here, and I'll begin organizing lessons for interested families." Relief and something like pleasure crossed Kade's face. "Good, that's good. We'll need supplies," Mrs. Finch said practically. Food, firewood, lamp oil, and your trunk needs to be brought over from our place. I can contribute to the cost of provisions, Abigail said quickly. I'm not without resources. We'll sort all that out, Kade assured her. The important thing is you have a place to stay while you get established. If teaching works out, you'll have income of your own soon enough. Then it's settled, Abigail said, a strange mixture of anxiety and excitement bubbling within her. Jenny and I will move in tomorrow. Later, as Mrs. Finch and Jenny returned to the Grayson ranch to gather necessities, Kade lingered behind with Abigail for a final look around the property. The chickens are laying well, he noted as they checked the coop. Fleming kept a good flock. You'll have fresh eggs daily. I've never cared for chickens before, Abigail admitted. In Boston, we simply bought eggs from the market. Jenny knows how. Her family keeps chickens. He pointed toward a small, fenced garden patch, now barren in the fall. You can plant vegetables come spring. Good soil here. Abigail tried to imagine herself planting a garden, collecting eggs, teaching frontier children. It was a far cry from her life in Boston, yet not entirely unappealing. There was a directness to life here, a connection to basic necessities that Boston's gentility often masked. Why did you come west? She asked suddenly. After the war, I mean, you could have returned to, wherever you're from. Missouri, he supplied, and there wasn't much to go back to. Farm was gone, parents died during the war. He stared out across the prairie. Out here, a man can build something new. No one cares which side you fought for or what your family name is. Just matters if you work hard and deal square. You fought for the Union, she ventured, a tight smile. Confederate, actually. Missouri was divided. My father believed in the Southern cause, so I followed. He glanced at her, something defensive in his posture. That going to be a problem, Abigail considered. Boston had been staunchly Union, and her own father had supplied boots for Northern troops. But the war had been over for 6 years. No, she said finally, the war is in the past. We're all Americans now trying to rebuild. The tension in his shoulders eased slightly. Not everyone feels that way. Well, I do, she said firmly. And I hope I can contribute something worthwhile here, regardless of where I came from or who I was meant to marry. He studied her face for a moment, then nodded. I believe you will, Miss Bowman. Abigail, she corrected with a small smile. If I'm to call you Kade, then you should use my given name as well. Abigail, he repeated, as if testing the sound of it. It suits you. The next day brought the challenge of setting up house. Jenny proved invaluable, knowing the rhythms of frontier life in ways Abigail did not. Together they cleaned the already tidy cabin, arranged Abigail's belongings, and made lists of necessities. Mrs. Finch contributed bedding, towels, and kitchen essentials, until the next supply wagon comes through. Kade appeared mid-afternoon with a wagon load of firewood, helping to stack it neatly against the side of the house. Should last you a few weeks, he said, driving the axe into a stump. I'll bring more before the first snow. Thank you. Abigail handed him a cup of coffee, watching as he drank it in long gulps. There was an efficiency to his movements that spoke of a man accustomed to physical labor. Yet he wasn't rough or uncouth like some of the men she'd observed in town. I've sent word to some of the families about lessons, he told her. Expect visitors in the next few days. The Hendersons will likely come first. They have 4 children and live closest. I should prepare a curriculum, Abigail mused, and determine what books or materials they might already have. Most will have a Bible, maybe a McGuffey reader or two, Kade said. Not much else. Paper's precious out here. I brought some books with me, Abigail said. Classics mainly and some mathematics texts. It's a starting point. He nodded approvingly. You seem to be taking all this in stride. Do I? She laughed softly. I assure you I'm terrified beneath this calm exterior. Everything here is so different from what I know. You're adapting well, he insisted. Some Eastern women arrive and spend their first months complaining about the dust, the lack of society, the crude conditions. Oh, I may yet complain about the dust, she warned him with a smile. But complaining doesn't change circumstances, only action does. Something like admiration flickered in his eyes. Fleming chose well when he wrote to you. The mention of her intended bridegroom sobered her. I wish I could have known him. He was a good man, Kade said simply. Honest, hardworking, would have treated you right. Thank you for telling me that, she said softly. It helps to know what kind of man he was. Kade shifted uncomfortably as if emotional discussions were foreign territory. I should head back. Got cattle to check before dark. He set the coffee cup down. If you need anything, send Jenny over or fire 3 shots in the air. We'll hear it. I'm sure we'll be fine, Abigail assured him. Jenny is very capable and I'm not entirely helpless. He grinned suddenly, transforming his serious face. No, you certainly aren't that. After he left, Abigail found herself watching his retreating figure longer than strictly necessary. There was something compelling about Kade Grayson, a solidity, a quiet strength that inspired confidence. In the chaos of her current circumstances, he represented stability. The following weeks brought a steady stream of visitors as word spread about the new teacher. The Henderson family arrived first, as Kade had predicted, a weather-beaten rancher, his robust wife, and 4 children ranging from 6 to 15. They brought gifts of preserves and smoked venison, eager to secure lessons for their brood. We can pay partly in goods and partly in cash, Mrs. Henderson explained earnestly. Daniel here is handy with carpentry if you need shelves or a proper blackboard. That would be wonderful, Abigail said, already warming to the family. I was thinking $2 per child per month, with a family rate for multiple students. Would that be manageable? Relief crossed Mrs. Henderson's face. More than fair. When could they start? I'm planning to begin regular lessons next Monday, Abigail explained. 3 days a week initially from 9 until 2. As more students join, we may adjust the schedule. By the end of the week, Abigail had enrolled 12 students from 7 families, with promises of more once word continued to spread. Daniel Henderson spent Saturday constructing a long table with benches and a proper blackboard mounted on the wall of the main room, which would serve as the schoolroom during class hours. Life settled into a rhythm. Mornings were devoted to teaching, afternoons to household tasks and preparation for the next day's lessons. Jenny proved to be not only good company but an eager assistant, helping younger children with their letters while Abigail worked with the older students on more advanced subjects. Kade visited regularly, ostensibly to check on Fleming's cattle that grazed in the nearby pastures, but he often timed his visits to coincide with the end of the school day. He would listen with genuine interest as Abigail recounted the children's progress, occasionally offering insights about the families or suggesting practical lessons that would serve the students well in frontier life. Thomas Miller has a good head for figures, he noted one afternoon as they walked the property boundary. His father runs the mercantile in Yankton. Boy will likely take over someday. Yes, I've noticed his aptitude, Abigail agreed. He's already working through advanced arithmetic. I wish I had more advanced textbooks for him. Supply wagon comes through next week. I can ask them to bring some books from Sioux City, Kade offered. That would be wonderful, thank you. Abigail pulled her shawl tighter as a crisp November wind swept across the prairie. Winter's coming soon, isn't it? First snow usually hits by late November, Kade confirmed, glancing at the cloudy sky. Winters are harsh here, cold like you've never felt in Boston. You'll need more firewood, and we should check the root cellar to make sure you have enough provisions. Jenny and I have been preserving vegetables and fruit from neighboring farms, Abigail assured him. And Mrs. Henderson brought us a quarter of a beef last week. I think we're well stocked. Kade nodded approvingly. Good. There can be times when the snow makes travel impossible for weeks. You need to be prepared. You sound concerned, Mr. Grayson, Abigail teased gently. Just being practical, he replied, but his eyes lingered on her face. You've become important to this community already. The children need you. And I need them, she admitted. Teaching gives me purpose, a reason to get up each morning. After my parents died, I felt adrift. Coming here, despite the circumstances, has given me a new direction. They walked in companionable silence for a while, the vast Dakota sky stretching endlessly above them. Will you go back east? Kade asked finally, the question hanging between them. When spring comes, I mean, once you've saved enough money. Abigail considered the question seriously. I don't know, I have no real ties there anymore. My sister has her own family, and Boston holds painful memories now. She gazed across the rolling grassland. There's a freedom here I never experienced in the East, a chance to define myself by my own actions rather than by family connections or social expectations. The frontier isn't kind to everyone, Kade warned. It breaks some people. And strengthens others, she countered. I think I could build a life here, a good one. Something shifted in Kade's expression, relief, perhaps, or pleasure. I believe you could. The first snow came 2 weeks later, transforming the prairie into a white wonderland overnight. Abigail woke to find drifts piled against the north side of the cabin and icicles hanging from the eaves. The world had gone eerily silent, the usual wind muffled by the blanket of snow. It's beautiful, she breathed, staring out the window at the crystalline landscape. It's trouble, Jenny countered practically. We'll need to clear a path to the barn and check on the chickens. Good thing Mr. Grayson brought extra firewood yesterday. They bundled up in their warmest clothes and ventured out to tend to the animals. The bitter cold took Abigail's breath away, but there was exhilaration in the crunch of snow beneath her boots and the diamond-like sparkle of sunlight on untouched drifts. School continued despite the weather, though attendance became more sporadic as travel grew difficult. On the worst days, only the Henderson children, who lived closest, would make the journey. Abigail used these smaller sessions for more individualized instruction, delighting in the children's progress. Kade's visits became more frequent as winter deepened. He would arrive bundled against the cold, often bringing supplies or news from town. Sometimes he stayed for supper, entertaining them with stories of cattle drives and frontier characters. Did you really meet Wild Bill Hickok? Jenny asked one evening as they sat around the fire after the meal. Briefly, in Abilene, Kade confirmed. He wasn't as tall as they make him out to be in those dime novels, but he had steady eyes, not someone you'd want to cross. Have you had many adventures, Mr. Grayson? Abigail asked, genuinely curious about the life that had shaped him. Nothing worth writing stories about, he demurred. Drove cattle up from Texas twice. Prospected for gold in the Black Hills for a season, found just enough to buy my first breeding stock. Mostly, I've just worked hard and tried to build something that will last. That's an adventure of its own kind, Abigail observed. Creating something from nothing. He gave her a considering look. Most would find it dull compared to tales of gunfights and outlaws. Perhaps those people don't understand real courage, she replied. It takes more fortitude to face each day's challenges and build slowly than to live by the gun. You're an unusual woman, Abigail Bowman, Kade said softly. Am I? I simply value substance over sensation. She smoothed her skirt nervously, aware of Jenny's curious glance between them. "More coffee, Mr. Grayson, please. And it's still Kade, remember." There was gentle teasing in his voice. "Kade," she corrected herself, feeling a flush rise to her cheeks as she poured the coffee. December brought Christmas preparations. Abigail organized a small celebration for her students, complete with recitations and simple gifts of candy and hand-sewn bookmarks. The parents contributed food and decorations, transforming the schoolroom into a festive gathering place. "We've never had a proper school Christmas before, Mrs. Henderson confided as they watched the children perform. "It means so much to the little ones and to us parents, too." Kade attended the celebration, standing somewhat awkwardly among the families but watching the proceedings with evident pleasure. He had brought small carved wooden animals for each child: horses, cattle, birds, each perfectly shaped and sanded smooth. "You made these?" Abigail asked in amazement as the children exclaimed over their gifts. "Winter evenings are long," he said with a shrug. "Keeps my hands busy." "They're beautiful," she told him sincerely. "You have a gift." "Just a hobby," he dismissed, but she could tell her praise pleased him. After the families departed, Kade lingered to help clean up. Jenny, exhausted from the excitement, had gone to bed early, leaving Abigail and Kade alone in the main room. "I have something for you," he said, reaching into his coat pocket. "For Christmas." "Kade, you shouldn't have," Abigail protested, though curiosity and pleasure warmed her. "It's nothing grand," he cautioned, handing her a small package wrapped in brown paper. Abigail unwrapped it carefully to reveal a small wooden box with intricate prairie flowers carved into the lid. Inside, nestled in a scrap of velvet, was a silver hairpin topped with a tiny carved rose. "It's exquisite," she breathed, touching the delicate carving. "Did you make this too?" he nodded, seeming almost embarrassed. "The silver work was done by a fellow in Yankton who owed me a favor, but I carved the rose pattern." "No one has ever given me something so personal," Abigail said, deeply touched. "Thank you. I noticed you're always pushing that strand of hair behind your ear when you're teaching," he explained. "Thought this might be useful." The fact that he had observed such a small habit made her heart beat faster. "I have something for you as well," she admitted, retrieving a package from the shelf. Kade opened it to find a knitted scarf in deep blue wool. "You made this?" "Yes." "My stitches aren't as even as I'd like, but it should be warm." She had spent many evening hours working on it, wanting it to be perfect. He ran his fingers over the wool appreciatively. "No one's knitted anything for me since my mother died. Thank you." He wrapped it around his neck immediately. Perfect fit. They stood looking at each other in the warm glow of the fire, something unspoken hanging in the air between them. Abigail was acutely aware of his presence: the broad shoulders, the strong hands that could carve such delicate objects, the eyes that watched her with increasing warmth. "I should go," Kade said finally, reluctance evident in his voice. "Storms brewing by the feel of the air, of course." Abigail walked him to the door. "Be careful riding home." He paused with his hand on the latch, turning back to her. "Abigail." "Yes." For a moment it seemed he might say something significant, but then he simply smiled. "Merry Christmas." "Merry Christmas, Kade." After he left, Abigail stood by the window watching his figure disappear into the snowy darkness, her fingers absently touching the hairpin he had given her. The winter deepened, bringing blizzards that howled around the cabin for days at a time. During one particularly fierce storm in January, school was canceled for a full week as snowdrifts made travel impossible. Abigail and Jenny used the time to catch up on mending, baking, and reading aloud to each other from Abigail's collection of books. On the third day of the blizzard, as twilight approached and the wind reached a fever pitch, A pounding at the door startled them both. Who could be out in this? Jenny gasped, clutching her sewing. Abigail approached the door cautiously. "Who's there?" "It's Kade. Open up." She flung the door open to find him half frozen, his coat encrusted with snow and ice. "Kade, what on earth are you doing out in this storm?" "Checking on you," he managed through chattering teeth. "Lost. 2 calves already. Wanted to make sure you were safe." "Get in here this instant," Abigail commanded, pulling him inside and pushing the door shut against the howling wind. "Jenny, hot coffee and blankets, quickly." They helped him out of his frozen outer garments and settled him by the fire with blankets and hot coffee, laced with whiskey from the small medical supply Abigail kept. "You could have frozen to death," she scolded as color gradually returned to his face. "What were you thinking?" "Thinking about you," he said simply, his eyes meeting hers over the rim of the cup. Couldn't stop worrying. The directness of his answer silenced her momentarily. "Well, as you can see, we're perfectly fine," she said finally. "The roof is sound, we have ample firewood and enough food for weeks." "Good," he sighed, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. "Didn't realize how worried I was until I saw you standing here safe." Jenny, observing their exchange with interest, made a show of yawning. "I think I'll turn in early. The mending can wait until tomorrow." After she disappeared into the bedroom they shared, Abigail sat across from Kade, acutely aware of being alone with him. "The storm is too fierce for you to return home tonight," she said practically. "You'll have to stay here." He nodded, too exhausted to argue. "I can sleep by the fire." "Of course." She hesitated, then asked the question that had been bothering her. "Why were you so worried about us? We've weathered storms before." Kade stared into the fire, his expression unreadable. "This winter has been harder than most, lost more livestock than usual. The cold gets into your bones and stays there." He looked up at her. "And you're not used to frontier winters." "Thought maybe your supplies were running low or the roof had started leaking, or you could have frozen to death coming to check," she interrupted gently. "Would have been worth it," he said with quiet conviction. The simple statement hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning. "Kade," Abigail began, uncertain what she wanted to say. "You don't owe me anything," he said quickly. "I know you came out here to marry Fleming. I'm just a neighbor helping out." "Is that all you are?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. He met her gaze squarely. "That depends on you, Abigail. I've grown to care for you these past months. More than care, if I'm being honest, but I don't want to press where I'm not wanted." Her heart beat faster. "You're not unwanted," she said softly. Something like hope flickered in his eyes. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that my feelings for you have developed beyond mere friendship or gratitude." The admission made her feel vulnerable yet strangely liberated. "I didn't expect it. I came here to marry another man after all." "A man you never met," Kade pointed out gently. "A good man, yes, but a stranger to you. Unlike you, who started as a stranger but has become," she searched for the right word, "essential." Kade set his cup down and leaned forward, taking her hands in his. "I never believed in love at first sight or quick attachments. Always seemed like foolishness to me. But these months with you, seeing your strength, your kindness, your determination, it changes a person." "It does," Abigail agreed, marveling at how natural it felt to have her hands in his. "I came west seeking security, a practical arrangement. I never expected to find someone who would touch my heart." "I'm not a wealthy man," Kade warned. "The ranch is promising but not established like some. There would be hard work ahead for both of us." "I'm not afraid of work," she assured him, "and wealth has never been my primary concern. I value honesty, kindness, and character far more." "Then may I court you properly, Abigail Bowman?" His voice was formal, but his eyes held warmth that melted something inside her. Not rushed or presumptuous, but with intent and honor. "Yes," she said simply. "I would like that very much." He raised her hand to his lips, the gesture courtly yet intimate. "Then we'll begin tomorrow, weather permitting." The storm raged through the night but broke near dawn, revealing a transformed landscape of pristine white. Kade departed after breakfast, needing to check on his ranch and animals, but promised to return in 2 days' time. "Our first official courtship outing," he said with a grin as he prepared to leave. "Dress warmly." Jenny was delighted by the development. "I knew it." She crowed after Kade had gone. "Mrs. Finch owes me a pie. She said it wouldn't happen until spring." "You were betting on us?" Abigail asked, scandalized yet amused. "The whole county's been watching," Jenny informed her cheerfully. "Mr. Grayson hasn't shown interest in any woman since he settled here. Then suddenly he's riding over here every other day, bringing supplies we don't strictly need, staying for supper whenever invited." Was I the only one who didn't notice? Abigail wondered. "Probably," Jenny confirmed with teenage bluntness. "But that's all right. You noticed eventually." True to his word, Kade returned 2 days later with a horse-drawn sleigh. "Thought we might go for a ride," he suggested. "Show you some of the countryside you haven't seen yet." Bundled in every warm garment she possessed, Abigail settled beside him in the sleigh, a heated brick at her feet and thick buffalo robes tucked around them both. The sleigh glided smoothly over the snow, the horse's breath creating clouds in the crisp air. "It's magnificent," Abigail breathed as they crested a rise that revealed miles of untouched snowfields stretching toward distant bluffs. "Like a painting. Different kind of beauty than you're used to in Boston, I expect." "Yes, but no less beautiful for being different." She glanced at his profile, strong against the winter sky. "That's something I've learned here, to appreciate different forms of beauty, different ways of living." He smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "You're adapting well to frontier life." "Better than I expected," she admitted. "Though I still miss certain amenities. Hot running water, for instance." "Can't help you there," he chuckled. "Though I'm planning to build a proper bathhouse at the ranch this summer, something with a stove to heat the water." "That sounds heavenly," Abigail sighed, imagining a bath that didn't require hauling and heating multiple buckets of water. "I've been thinking about other improvements too," Kade said, his tone casual but his eyes intent on the horizon. "The house needs expanding if—" "Well, if a family were to live there." Abigail's breath caught. "Are you planning for a family, Mr. Grayson?" "Hoping for one," he corrected softly, finally looking at her. "Someday, with the right woman." The implication hung between them, neither needing to state it more explicitly. "I've always wanted children," Abigail said after a moment. "Teaching satisfies part of that desire, but having my own family, that's a different dream." "A good dream," he agreed, his voice warm. "One worth working toward." They spent the afternoon exploring the winter landscape, stopping to view frozen waterfalls and deer tracks in the snow. Kade was knowledgeable about the land, pointing out features and sharing stories of the area's settlement. "The Lakota called this region Maka Sitcha Bad Land," he explained as they paused to rest the horse. "Not because it was evil, but because it was difficult to traverse. The early French trappers translated it as les mauvaises terres, traverse or badlands to travel across." "You know a great deal about the history," Abigail observed. "Try to learn from those who were here before," he said. "The Lakota have wisdom about this land that newcomers like us are still discovering." "Are there still many native people in the territory?" "Some. Most have been moved to reservations further west." A shadow crossed his face. "It's not a proud chapter in our nation's story, the way the original inhabitants have been treated." "No, it isn't," Abigail agreed soberly. Her Eastern education had painted a simplified picture of Western expansion, but living here had given her a more nuanced understanding of the complex realities. Their courtship progressed through the winter months. Kade visited regularly, often staying for supper and evening conversations by the fire. They exchanged stories of their pasts, Abigail's sheltered Boston upbringing, Kade's experiences in the war and his early years in the West. Each revelation deepened their connection, building a foundation of understanding and respect. By February, they had established a comfortable routine. Sundays after church were devoted to outings, weather permitting, while weekday visits usually coincided with the end of school hours. Kade took an interest in Abigail's students, occasionally sharing practical knowledge of ranching, tracking, or local geography that supplemented her more academic lessons. "The children adore when you visit," Abigail told him one afternoon as they watched the last students trudge homeward through the snow. "Thomas Miller asked if you could teach them more about tracking animals." "Happy to," Kade replied, pleased by the request. "Useful skill out here." "I've been thinking," Abigail said hesitantly, "about next year's school term. The Territorial Board has officially offered me the position beginning in September." "You're considering accepting?" Kade watched her carefully. "I am. It would mean staying in Dakota Territory permanently." She met his gaze steadily. "Building a life here." The smile that spread across his face was answer enough. "I can't think of anything I'd like more." Spring arrived with sudden ferocity, the snow melting to reveal muddy earth and the first tender shoots of prairie grass. The transformation was remarkable, barren white landscapes giving way to vibrant green, wildflowers dotting the rolling hills, birds returning in noisy flocks. With the thaw came new challenges. Roads turned to muddy quagmires, making travel difficult. The stream near the cabin swelled dangerously, requiring Kade and several neighboring ranchers to construct a temporary dam to protect the property. "Nature giveth and nature taketh away," Mrs. Henderson observed philosophically as they watched the men work. "That's frontier life for you." But spring also brought new beginnings. Calves were born on the surrounding ranches, chickens began laying more prolifically, and gardens were planted with hope and optimism. "Fleming's brother arrived in Yankton yesterday," Kade informed Abigail one evening in late April. "He'll be coming out to see the property tomorrow." Anxiety flickered through her. "What if he wants me to leave immediately? School doesn't finish until May, and the children's examinations he won't," Kade assured her, taking her hands. "I've already spoken with him, explained the situation. He's grateful the place has been maintained and is happy for you to stay until arrangements can be made." "What arrangements?" she asked, puzzled. Kade's expression grew serious. "Abigail, we've been courting for months now. My feelings for you have only deepened with time." "I believe you feel the same." "You know I do," she confirmed softly. He took a deep breath. "Then I'd like to make it official. Will you marry me, Abigail? Build a life with me here in Dakota Territory?" Though she had anticipated this moment, the reality of it still took her breath away. "Yes," she answered without hesitation. "Yes, I will marry you, Kade." He pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a tender passion that spoke of months of restrained feeling. When they finally parted, both were breathless. "I've been carrying this for weeks, waiting for the right moment," Kade admitted, reaching into his pocket to retrieve a small velvet box. Inside was a delicate silver ring with a small pearl set amid intricate engravings of prairie flowers. "It's beautiful," Abigail whispered as he slipped it onto her finger. "Had it made in Sioux City," he explained. "Wanted something as unique as you are." "When shall we be married?" she asked, practical even in her happiness. "After school term ends," he suggested. Early June, perhaps. Gives us time to prepare, and the weather should be favorable. June it is, she agreed, still marveling at the ring on her finger, tangible proof of this new future she had never imagined when she first arrived in Yankton. The following day brought Samuel Fleming to the cabin, a shorter, stouter version of his late brother, with the same honest eyes and direct manner. "Tom wrote me about you," he told Abigail after introductions were made. "Said he'd found himself a proper Boston lady with a good head on her shoulders. Seems he was right." "Your brother and I never met," Abigail reminded him gently. "But from everything I've heard, he was a fine man. I'm sorry for your loss." Samuel nodded his thanks. "Tom built this place with a wife and family in mind. Seems fitting it should still serve that purpose, even if not quite as he planned. Mr. Grayson explained our intention to marry," Abigail confirmed. "He did, and I have a proposition for you both." Samuel pulled papers from his coat. "I'm settled in Minnesota with my family. Have no desire to relocate. Was planning to sell this property, but—" He glanced between them. "Tom would have liked knowing his place went to good people who'd appreciate it. I'm offering to sell it to you at a fair price, with reasonable terms." Kade and Abigail exchanged surprised looks. "That's very generous," Kade said carefully, "but I'm not sure we could manage it immediately. I've put most of my capital into expanding my herd this spring." "No rush," Samuel assured him. "Small down payment to secure the deal, rest paid over 5 years. The land's not going anywhere, and I'd rather see it in hands that will care for it properly." By the end of the visit, they had struck an agreement. Kade and Abigail would purchase the Fleming property, combining it with the Grayson ranch to create a substantial holding. They would make the Fleming house their home, as it was newer and had been built with a family in mind, while the Grayson ranch house would become quarters for hired hands. "A perfect solution," Abigail said that evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "Our own home, yet connected to all you've built." "Feels right," Kade agreed, his arm around her shoulders, "like pieces falling into place." News of their engagement spread quickly through the community, bringing congratulations and offers of help with wedding preparations. Mrs. Henderson and several other mothers of Abigail's students formed a committee to plan the celebration. "Nothing fancy," Mrs. Henderson assured them, "but proper. The first teacher in Yankton County deserves a proper wedding." The school term ended successfully, with all students showing marked improvement in their studies. The Territorial School Board, impressed by Abigail's results, confirmed her appointment for the following year with an increased salary. "We'll need to build a proper schoolhouse," Kade observed as they discussed plans for the fall term. "Can't have 20+ children crowding our living room forever." "The board has allocated funds for construction," Abigail confirmed. "They're considering a location central to the county, perhaps near the crossroads." "Good spot," he agreed. "Meanwhile, we can convert the smaller bedroom here for your use until it's built. Move the bed to our room, put in a desk and more shelves." The casual way he referred to our room sent a pleasant shiver through Abigail. After years of independence and then months of uncertainty, the idea of sharing a life and a home with Kade filled her with quiet joy. Their wedding day dawned clear and warm, a perfect early June morning. The ceremony was held outdoors, beneath a canopy of trees near the stream. Nearly everyone in the county attended, bringing food, flowers, and good wishes. Jenny helped Abigail dress in a new gown of pale blue silk ordered from Sioux City and altered to fit perfectly. Her honey-brown hair was arranged in an elegant style, adorned with wildflowers and the silver hairpin Kade had given her at Christmas. "You look beautiful," Mrs. Finch declared, uncharacteristic tears in her eyes. "Like you belong here." "I do belong here," Abigail realized. More than I ever belonged in Boston. Kade waited for her beneath an arch woven with prairie flowers and ribbons. His usually practical attire had been replaced by a new suit, and he'd trimmed his beard and hair for the occasion. But it was the look in his eyes as she walked toward him that Abigail would always remember, a mixture of awe, tenderness, and joy that made her heart swell. The ceremony was simple but meaningful, their vows spoken clearly for all to hear. Judge Harrison, who had ridden from Yankton for the occasion, pronounced them husband and wife with evident pleasure. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced to the gathering, "may I present Mr. and Mrs. Grayson." The celebration lasted well into the evening, with food and music and dancing under the stars. As twilight deepened, Kade led Abigail away from the festivities toward their home where lanterns glowed welcomingly in the windows. "Happy, Mrs. Grayson?" he asked, his arm around her waist. "Incredibly so," she assured him, leaning into his embrace. "Though still getting used to my new name." "It suits you," he murmured, kissing her temple. "Almost as much as you suit this land." "Who would have thought," Abigail mused, "that arriving in Yankton with nowhere to go would lead to finding exactly where I belong?" Kade smiled down at her, his eyes reflecting the first stars appearing above. "When I said stay here, this is your home now, I had no idea how true those words would become." "The best kind of truth," Abigail agreed, reaching up to touch his face. "The kind that grows deeper with time." 1 year later, Abigail stood on the porch of their expanded home, watching Kade return from the south pasture. Their first year of marriage had brought changes and challenges, a severe hailstorm that damaged crops, a difficult calving season, the building of the new schoolhouse that now stood proudly at the crossroads, but through it all, their partnership had only strengthened. Kade dismounted, handing the reins to young Billy Thomas, their newest ranch hand. At 16, Billy had been one of Abigail's first students and now worked for them during summer months, learning ranching while saving for his own future. "How are my girls?" Kade asked, climbing the porch steps to kiss Abigail soundly. "We're well," she assured him, one hand resting on her rounded belly where their child grew. The baby was due in late summer, and Abigail had already arranged for a substitute teacher for the first months of the school term. "She's been kicking up a storm today," she added, guiding his hand to feel the movement. "He's going to be strong," Kade countered with a grin, their ongoing disagreement about the baby's gender a source of amusement between them. "Either way, this child will be loved," Abigail said softly. "Beyond measure," Kade agreed, his voice equally tender, just like his mother. As they stood together watching the sunset paint the prairie in gold and crimson, Abigail reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She had arrived in Yankton a mail-order bride with nowhere to go, but had found a home, a purpose, and a love deeper than she had ever imagined possible. "What are you thinking about?" Kade asked, noticing her contemplative expression. "How life's greatest disappointments sometimes lead to its greatest joys," she answered honestly. "If Thomas Fleming had met me that day, if everything had gone according to plan, we wouldn't be here now," Kade finished for her. "Sometimes the plans we make for ourselves pale in comparison to what life has in store." "A wise observation, Mr. Grayson," Abigail teased, leaning into his embrace. "I have my moments, Mrs. Grayson," he replied with a smile, "especially when inspired by you." Their laughter mingled with the evening breeze, carrying across the land that had become their shared legacy, a place of hard work and deep love, of challenges met together, and dreams built side by side. The mail-order bride had found her home, not in the arrangement she had planned, but in the unexpected welcome of a cowboy's heart.